peacetime emergency declared under Chapter 12 of Minnesota statutes. As is permitted under our open meeting laws in these conditions, this meeting of Executive Council is conducted virtually. All votes will be counted with a roll call vote. Our first order of business is to approve the draft minutes of regularly scheduled Executive Council meeting held February 24th of 2021 and the 6 emergency Executive Council meetings held since February 24th, 2021. I would now call for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
At this time, I would ask for a roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison, how do you vote?
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, if you are present. And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries by majority vote. The minutes are approved. At this time, our first order of business will be presented by Commissioner of the Department of Administration, Alice Roberts Davis. And for the members on here, it is a proposal to codify the speaker policy at these meetings, especially as we mentioned a little earlier, we're starting to think about informally moving back to in-person meetings. And so this is a clarification of the speaker policy to make it easier and uniformed to have public participation in all of these meetings. At this time, I would recognize the commissioner for as much time as she may consume.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor Walz and members of the Executive Council. A public engagement policy and resolution to adopt are in your meeting packets. On occasion, there are issues before the Council for which additional comments would be better to inform the discussion. We have drafted a public engagement policy to meet that goal in a consistent and transparent manner, as well as balancing the need for organized and efficient Executive Council meetings. The policy facilitates public engagement within the existing format of the Executive Council meetings. Specifically, the policy gives direction to the public on how to make requests to speak and what requirements they must follow in making those requests. The Council will make equitable determinations on whether and when to allow members of the public to speak at meetings. Second, the policy requires that requests to speak must be made 5 business days before the meeting and include basic identifying information about the speaker and include a description of the comments to be made. Finally, it provides up to 5 minutes per speaker and allows the Council to end comments that are not relevant to the business before the Council or engages in hostile conduct. This policy is designed to provide a fair opportunity for people and groups to present helpful comments to the Executive Council. Open meeting law does not require public testimony, but the Council recognizes and supports the benefits of engaged dialogue. This policy will remain in effect until amended or suspended by the Executive Council, and the Executive Council has the authority to agree by a majority of its members to deviate from this policy under extraordinary circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this time, I would open it up to questions or discussions from the Executive Council.
Auditor Blaha.
You're recognized, Auditor.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner. I think this is a reasonable policy, and I hope that people we do continue. I think our basic idea is that whenever we can allow discussion, we will. And I think that's been, so I appreciate that, Governor Walz, that's how you've been chairing these meetings. I think that's appropriate, that, more discussion, the better. This way, I'll just keep it nice and orderly. We'll all be prepared to really take the information in well. Thank you.
Auditor, I appreciate that insight. Again, it's meant to be the transparency, and it also helps all of us be prepared for where there's going to be questions and to get pertinent information to the folks who are coming in front of the Council. And there's been engaged and lively discussions around important topics in these different meetings. So, any further discussion? At this time, I would call for a motion to approve the request for the policy.
So moved.
A roll call vote of members. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The speaker policy is now approved. At this time, I'd like to recognize Minnesota Management and Budget Assistant Commissioner Jennifer Hassemer to present a request to approve collateral for state funds. Assistant Commissioner, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Thank you, and good morning, Governor and members of the Executive Council. For the record, I'm Jennifer Hassemer, Assistant Commissioner at Minnesota Management and Budget. I have two items on the agenda today, and the first, as already described, is a request for the approval of new collateral used to secure state funds on deposit at 3 of the state's banks. Executive Council approval is required by Minnesota Statutes, Section 9.031, Subdivisions 2 and 3. The collateral listed on your memo represents new collateral and the replacement of previously approved collateral that is maturing. I'm requesting your approval of this agenda item and will pause here for any questions.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. I would use what the Attorney General is always so good about clarifying for our listeners today, that all of the information and the business at hand today is provided by all of the pertinent parties to the members of the Executive Council quite a ways in advance, so that we are able to do our due diligence and then be prepared to vote accordingly. At this time, I would ask, are there any questions or discussions from the Executive Council? Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve the request for collateral.
So moved.
Now I'll call roll call vote. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries by majority vote. The request is approved. Our next order of business will also be from MMB Assistant Commissioner Hassemer to present a request to approve designation of state community depository accounts. Assistant Commissioner, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Great, thank you again, Governor. So this agenda item is a request to designate the attached list of bank accounts as depositories for state funds, as required by Minnesota Statutes, Section 9.031, Subdivision 1. The single bank community depository accounts are in communities having only one banking institution, and the multiple bank community depository accounts are located in communities with more than one bank and were competitively bid out. These accounts are used to deposit fees and payments to the state until they are swept into the state's main bank account in St. Paul. The contracts will be established for up to a 5-year term. I'm asking that you approve these accounts as state depositories today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. At this time, I would open it up for any questions or comments from the Executive Council. Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve the request.
So moved.
At this time, I'll call roll call vote. Secretary of State Steinman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan? Attorney General Ellison? Attorney General Ellison, how do you vote?
He's on mute right now. He'll need to unmute.
Star
Sorry, I was
6.
yelling aye. I was saying
Thank-
aye.
Thank you, Attorney General. And Auditor Blaha, how do you vote?
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. Is there any further discussion from the Executive Council before I call for a motion to adjourn? Hearing none, I'd call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Call roll call vote. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries, and this meeting of the Executive Council is adjourned. At this time, I would call the meeting to order of the State Board of Investments. Once again, as chair of the State Board of Investments, I've determined that an in-person meeting is not practical due to the current health pandemic and ongoing peacetime emergency declared under Chapter 12 of Minnesota statutes. As is permitted under our open meeting laws, this meeting may be held virtually, and all votes will be counted with a roll call vote. The first order of business is to call for a motion to approve the draft minutes of the February 24th, 2021 SBI meeting.
So moved.
I would now call roll call vote to approve the minutes. Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The minutes from the February 24th, 2021 meeting are approved. I would now call for a motion to approve the State Board of Investment Public Engagement Policy. The Executive Council approved this same policy in the previous meeting, and the policy will also be presented for the Land Exchange Board. Are there any discussions? This is an identical policy that matches up with what you just heard from the Commission. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion.
So moved.
I now ask a roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison, how do you vote?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The State Board of Investment Public Engagement Policy is now approved. I'd now like to recognize Executive Director Perry of the State Board of Investment to give the following reports: the SB5 performance summary, the Executive Director's administrative report, and a report from SBI Administrative Committee. For efficiency, I'm going to suggest that we vote to approve the Administrative Committee's recommendation in a single motion after hearing the report. Hearing no objections, at this time, I would like to recognize Executive Director Perry for as much time as you may consume.
Good morning, Governor and members. If I could have everyone turn to tab A, our performance summary. If you look on page 2, you'll see at the end of the quarter ending March 31st, 2021, we were responsible for a little shy of $117 billion, 84.5 of which were the pension funds. Happy to report as of this morning, the pension funds are at $88 billion, and also everyone would be happy to know that as of this morning, we are in the process of investing $1.4 billion received by MMB yesterday of federal stimulus money. If you turn to page 3, you'll see that we are ahead of both of our long-term objectives. For the 10 years, we have added 30 basis points to the composite index of the combined funds and provided a real return of 5.9%. On page 4, you'll notice down at the bottom that we have exceeded the composite index fund for all reporting periods. Happy to report that for the last 12 months, we were able to generate a return of 35.7%. On page 5, you'll notice that we are pretty much in line with our asset allocation. The returns for each of the asset classes are in the ensuing pages. I'll just briefly point for the last year that our public equities, we had a return of 60.4%. If you turn the page, you'll see that we were slightly 80 basis points negative for 1 year for our total fixed income program, but we did generate a return of 14.1% for our private markets program. If you turn the page to page 10, you'll see that our performance relative to the volatility equivalent benchmark was accretive for all reporting periods. If you turn the pages following, you'll notice that for most reporting periods, we continue to be in the top quartile for most periods and against most comparisons. If you turn to tab B, I will. Does anyone have any questions regarding performance?
Auditor, you are recognized.
I think this might be the best time for me to ask this question. You know, as we're going through, I mean, the performance is, again, kind of stunning that in how good it is. And I think the question that a lot of people are asking right now naturally is around inflation, as we see inflation looming on the horizon. And I know you've talked to us a lot about this, but could y'all just kind of remind us kind of what our strategies are to protect us against some of that short-term or long-term volatility and because of inflation?
Madam Auditor, members, with regards to inflation, we try to be long-term investors and have set our asset allocation such that we take this in regard. Given that we have a very strong growth portfolio and where the current level is of our interest rates, we believe that we've got the portfolio at a point where we'd be able to address inflation as it comes up. But at this juncture, given where we're at, I'd say that while there is a lot of discussion about inflation, we also keep very much in mind that given the levels that we're at, that deflation is still also a possibility. But I'm sure you'll hear quite a bit discussion in the ensuing days if you listen to a lot of financial discussion on the tube and in the paper about inflation. But I'd like to remind everyone that our interest rate levels are still at historic lows. We're a little bit above 2% for 30-year T-bills, and I want to remind, well, most of you are probably younger than I am, but inflation during the early 80s was 20%. I would say that I don't think we've got to worry about significant inflation, but I would anticipate that if we have some growth, there will be a little bit of inflation, but I'm not convinced that at this juncture in the near term that would be all bad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And Auditor, you bring up a good point about the performance, and it. I would note the Director and I were speaking from a historical perspective. This is one of the strongest years ever, and COVID, once again, the paradox of COVID, of areas that excelled and those that were left behind. Certainly, the good news is that our pension funds and state accounts are in the strongest position as they possibly could be or ever have been, and the under Director Perry's leadership, our state ranks amongst, if not the top state in performance around this. So there's the positive side, but it stands in great contrast to those folks and those small businesses who struggled during the year. But this is a positive side. With that, please proceed, Director.
Yeah, people
Governor,
turn
this is Keith Ellison. If I just may say,
Absolutely.
I don't want to lose this opportunity to just agree with you and the auditor, commending Mr. Perry. Good job to you and your team. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Attorney General. Please proceed, Director.
If we turn to my administrative report on tab B, the first item is report on our budget and travel. You'll notice on attachment A and page 3 that we are pretty much below our budget due to not completely filling all the staffing positions that we had anticipated, but also not traveling at all during the pandemic. But we believe that we've continued to be frugal and we'll be returning dollars back to the pension plans who give us our initial funding at the end of the fiscal year. The second item is presentation of matters that the SBI has some concern about during the legislative process. For the most part, if you look at our tracker on page 4 and 5, there were 6 items that we've been tracking. The one that we've believed that may have some traction is the first one. Based on most recent conference report, we've noticed that this one is still having some discussion. What this is the ability for the State Board of Investment to invest dollars that was received by DNR for financial assurance held in trust to offset some environmental impacts from mining and exploration in the Iron Range. The funds are currently held at a local bank, and this bill would direct the DNR to work with the SBI to determine a more appropriate long-term and investment allocation for those dollars. Staff has been working with DNR and has made itself available if the legislature would like to speak with us. I let everyone know that if this does become bill, that we would be bringing information and report to the board before we proceeded with any investment dollars on our part. The remaining bills don't appear to have not appeared in any omnibus bills, but we have been continuing to work with the pension commissions on a bill that would require all independent fire relief associations to invest solely with the SBI. Currently, the associations may invest with the SBI in our supplemental investment fund or the statewide plan that's part of that fund, or they can choose to invest with private money managers. We've just been discussing with the authors of the bill and remain ready to bring anything before the board if that does become law.
Auditor, you are recognized.
Thank you, Governor. And again, thank you, Mansco. And I know that we've also discussed the volunteer fighter investments bill. Our office has a working group on volunteer firefighters, and our group has taken a position against this because of some local control issues. However, I have been talking with Representative Rasmussen and his ideas about increasing investment in the SBI. I think we do have some agreement on, and so we'll continue to talk about that. How do we help more invest with the SBI, while at the same time preserving some local control for those organizations? Thank you.
I'd like everyone to understand that we aren't advocating one way or the other. We just staff makes itself available to help when required. You'll notice that we have also submitted updates for the legislatively mandated restrictions on Sudan and Iran investing. And I believe as of this morning that there is no litigation that of any significance that the SBI is involved in. If you turn to tab C, I will review the SBI Administrative Committee report. The committee met in April and May to consider my work plan, our budget and our budget for fiscal year 2022. The budget also we do present every 2 years, although it's updated every year. There's also a review of the continuing fiduciary education plan as dictated by statute, and a review of the executive director's evaluation process. The members of the SBI Administrative Committee are Carl Procaccini, who's the governor's representative and sits as chair. The other board members designees are B.B. Black, Ramona Advani, and Luz Freeze, representing the state auditor, recommending the Secretary of State, the state auditor, the Attorney General, respectively. The three pension fund directors, Aaron Leonard, Jay Stoffel, and Doug Anderson, and two representatives of the Investment Advisory Council, Gary Martin, who's the chair of the council, and Sean Wishmeyer. The first item I'll go over with you is a review of my work plan, which we set out every year. I won't go through the entire plan, but would like to point out several items of note. If you turn to page 4 under Attachment A, you'll notice some highlight items. I'm not going to go through all of those as well, but would like to bring mention to several important ones. One, we will be doing a comprehensive review of our private markets portfolio, somewhat similar to what we did in the past year with our public markets. I don't believe that there's any problem there. We've recently engaged our private markets consultant, Allborn, who we just signed a contract with, and we'll be reviewing the portfolio with them. We'll also be having internal discussions with our staff, and also we'll be having discussions with the Investment Advisory Council. I'd like to make sure everyone knows there's nothing broken. We believe, again, we've got a premier private markets portfolio. Over the last 40 years, we think that we've had excellent performance, but I wanted to take this as an opportunity to go back and actually affirmatively look at the decisions we've made and the structure we've made to see if there are any improvements that we might be able to make, some changes we might be able to make. I would anticipate that at the end of the day, we will give a big gold stamp to the current portfolio, and that there'll be very minor changes. But we think that this is important to ensure that we can continue to have premier performance going forward. The next item I'd like to talk about, I call a climate risk analysis. As everyone's aware, the last several years we've had several discussions at the board and engagement with quite a few members of the public who are interested in this area, and we also have had our special projects consultant generate a report. Given that time moves on, I'm still a believer that divestment does not necessarily represent the best approach to responsible investing, but also cognizant that time marches on, and continue to hear deadlines of 2030, 2040, and 2050, and we get closer to those dates all the time. My plan is to engage our special projects consultant to do a comprehensive review of climate risk within the portfolio, and to help us develop a strategy so that we're better able to ensure that we're doing everything proper to ensure that we are on track to maintain compliance with the Paris Accord, which we have implicitly agreed to through some of the engagements that we're in. The intent is to take a strong look at it. I know in the past we've talked about joining the Net Zero Alliance. That may be one of the things we do. We will also review what others have done, similar to New York Common or BlackRock. We believe that we've done some of the same things, but we're probably going to more formalize it. And we will come back to the board with a recommendation as to an outline for the approach that we should be taking with regards to how we address climate change at the SBI going forward. The next item I'd like to talk about is that I will be.
Governor,
yes.
if I may, I don't know whether you'd like to hold questions or comments to the end, but I did have one on the climate issue.
No,
I'm happy to wait.
Please,
Those.
Mr. Secretary, you're recognized. Why don't we go ahead at this point for the director to answer questions around climate? Sure.
Well, as you yourself said, Mr. Perry, there's a lot of public interest in this, increasingly so. I think yet at this meeting, we're going to hear from some folks who don't sit on this board. And I don't expect that to go away because the issue isn't going to go away. And I think all of us, I don't want to speak for anyone else on the board, we feel strongly about the underlying issue. That said, as you've quite properly recognized, we have some guardrails and constraints. We are fiduciaries and we have to take that legal obligation seriously. So I just wanted to say a comment and then a question. The comment is I commend you and your staff for being proactive on this because we got to look before we leap. And if and when we leap on something like this, we've got to know that we're keeping with our fiduciary duty. My question is, since this is part of your work plan and you're undertaking this report through one of the consultants over the next year, do you expect that, say, a year from now, we'll have such a report, or is it that you're going to launch the undertaking, or the consultant is this year, and we might have to wait a little bit longer? Do you have any sense on the timing?
I've learned the hard way, and as you'll see in the next item I talk about, that I should stop putting things down in writing because I have no control over the timing. We do expect to launch this fiscal year. We may have some results at some point in the fiscal year, but in my report, I've kind of cautioned that some of the items that we start this year may extend to fiscal 23. We'll make every endeavor possible to make certain that we come up with an appropriate strategy, and we'll bring it back when we've got that, regardless of the time frame. But the intent is to get it started.
Well, I thank you. I just want to say again, thank you and your staff for being proactive. I think this report will probably be really helpful to us in terms of what, if anything, can we or should we do next. And I think it gives us that deep dive that I think we're looking for, certainly that I'm looking for. So thanks a lot.
Auditor, you're recognized.
Yeah, I would like to echo a lot of what the Secretary of State just said. I think that a lot of our discussions around how we're addressing climate change in our portfolio have been where we've had some demands to do things we're already doing, and we've had some people assuming that we're doing some things that we're not. And so I think that this is really important to get that good baseline to say, all right, let's make sure we're all talking about this the same. And then I think even the process of looking and doing the analysis will have a benefit in that it forces those that we invest in to have the ability to tell us what their footprint is. And it starts to push, that transparency starts to drive some change on its own. And I also like this, and I think this also applies to the ESG item analysis and work that you're doing. Just a reminder that we're not starting at zero here, that we're not starting at, is climate change real? That's not where we're starting. We're not even starting from where the last, our last report was. The idea is, where are we now and where do we have to be, again, to accommodate our commitment to the Paris Climate Accord. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to have some really good data and some really good analysis so that we can all be talking about the same thing, at least starting from there. We'll get a good starting point. We know where we are so we can figure out where to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Auditor. Director Perry, please proceed.
Yes, I'd like to note that the climate issue and the one I'm about to talk to, believe that both of these efforts that we're initiating are in concert with the board's directive to me from the resolution of the State Board of Investments concerning environmental, social, and governance initiatives that was passed February 26th of last year. And so we listen and we try to move forward. The next item that I would like to speak about is I plan on putting together a task force of IAC members to help us address the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our investment program. Initially, the thought here was to look primarily at whether or not we should attempt to solely put together a program that would have us engage with private market managers who had minority or women ownership. But I believe that once the task force is together, we do have a couple of members on the Investment Advisory Council who have been very encouraging that we should be going down this road. We will be looking at other avenues of beyond just private markets, but other things that we might bring back to the board that should be addressed in this important area. So we think that those are three things that are very important, but I'd also like everyone to notice that we do have some administrative work that has to be done in the next year. Both of our our general investment consultant and our special projects investment consultants contracts expire next spring. So we are moving forthwith to reissue RFPs and to go through the process, see if what else is out there. But it's my hope that very quickly that we issue RFPs and go through our process and bring back two recommendations for the board for our consultants. I would like to say that our current consultants, from my perspective, have done a wonderful job, and they will be definitely be invited back to compete in this round. We also will be putting out RFP for our general custodian and also the custodian who holds the state cash. Those are two important things of note. So as well as our RFP for our accounting system. So staff will be rather busy this year, just trying to keep the doors open. As I mentioned earlier, while this is my annual report, some of these things may spill over into fiscal 23 as well. If we turn to the next section, it's my budget, and I'll just have people refer to pages 16 and 17. You'll notice that, as I mentioned earlier, that for our operating budget, it's projected that we will be returning back about $2 million to the pension plans this fiscal year. But that being said, we'll be asking for a similarly sized budget for fiscal year 20 and 22 on the order of $8.7 and $8.9 million respectively. Like everyone to recognize that while we have turned dollars back in the past, we continue to budget in the hopes that we can get staff up from 25 people to 26 people. You might remember that I have been talking about risk to the SBI is the fact that we do have one of the smallest staffs of most of our peers, but we will continue to try to push forward and handle that. Don't believe that we can't with the current staff. I'm still pretty confident we can do the job at the level that we have continued to do, but I just think it's a risk if we don't begin to address this and always have the budget to reflect the ability that we will try to add staff where necessary. So we're, again, for our operating budget, we'll be asking in FY 2022 for $8.7 million and 2023 $8.9 million, recognizing that if we do have a growth spurt, that we are always able to bring the administrative committee back together if we find that to be necessary. The second part of our budget is for investment support. This is the budget that is used to pay for all of our consultants and for our accounting system. Budget last year was $5 million. We will definitely underspend that. The reason that the budget was that high was because we were in the process of seeking out a private markets consultant, and we now have one engaged one. Fortunately, we hadn't finished negotiating with them when we put the budget together, but fortunately, we were able to continue to be pretty strong negotiators. And while we're asking, the budget is listed at $4 million for each of the next 2 years, we believe that we will be returning part of that back as well. And the next item in the administrative report, on attachment C, you'll see first of all, does anyone have any questions about the budget? Okay, the next item is the continuing fiduciary education. We have made we're not recommending any changes to it from last year's. It's required each year that the board reapprove the continuing fiduciary education plan as required by Minnesota Statute 356A.13. But the plan is essentially there is to ensure that we go through several processes to make certain that both the board members and the IAC and staff keeps up to date and has an understanding of their fiduciary responsibilities. And the last item in the plan is the recommendation for the executive director's evaluation process. So that's all I've got. If anyone has any further questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Director Perry. At this time, are there any questions on the administrative committee matters? Hearing none, for efficiency's sake, I'd like to ask the SBI to approve these administrative committee matters in a single motion. I'd like to call for a motion to approve 1, the executive director's proposed work plan for fiscal year 2022, 2, the budget plan for fiscal years 22 and 23, 3, the continuing fiduciary education plan, and 4, the executive director's education process. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
At this time, I'd like to have roll call vote. Secretary of State Simon, how do you vote?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The reports and recommendations from the SBI Administrative Committee report are approved. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Gary Martin, Chair of the Investment Advisory Council, to deliver the Private Markets Investment Program. Mr. Martin, you're recognized for as much time as you may consume. Commissioner, do we have Mr. Martin on and unmuted?
I do not see Mr. Martin as a participant. And if he is calling in, he will need to press *6 to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Martin, is that you?
Okay. Yes. Thank you very
Thank-
much. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No, totally understand. You are recognized at this time to present the private market commitments.
Great. Thank you. And good morning, Governor and members. On Monday, May 17th, the Investment Advisory Council met with Executive Director Perry and his staff to review the investment results for the first quarter of 2021 and to discuss staff's due diligence and recommendations for commitments to 6 private market investment funds. Now, these 6 commitment recommendations total $1.35 billion and are listed on page 1 of the memorandum under tab D in your meeting materials. All 6 commitment recommendations are with existing managers with whom the SBI has historically had very successful relationships. The Council's discussions with staff focused on each general partner's organization and team, their investment strategy, the market opportunity, their historical track record, as well as ESG and diversity and inclusion considerations. The first 4 commitment recommendations are in the private equity sector. Blackstone Capital Partners Asia Fund 2 will focus on making large-scale and control-oriented private equity investments in the Asia-Pacific region. Blackstone focuses heavily on sectors with understandable business models, free cash flow generation, and healthy returns on capital. The second investment recommendation is with regard to the KKR Minnesota Partnership. This is designed for the SBI to co-invest in certain investments made by KKR funds in which the SBI is also a limited partner. Such a partnership would be invested consistent with guidelines around portfolio construction and discretion agreed upon by both KKR and the SBI, including the appropriate time horizon as well as sizing of individual investments. It's anticipated that co-investment opportunities may arise from corporate private equity transactions in several KKR strategies that the SBI is invested in or may approve in the future. The TPG Growth Fund 5 will focus on making growth equity and controlled buyout investments across sectors in which the TPG Growth team has developed deep expertise. These sectors include business services, consumer, healthcare, internet, digital media and communications, as well as software and enterprise technology. The fund will also be thematically integrated across geographies with a primary focus on North America and India, and selectively in other geographies across its core sectors. Next, the TPG Tech Adjacencies Fund 2 will invest primarily in companies within the internet, software, digital media, and other similar technology sectors. TPG believes this fund can provide a flexible source of capital to take advantage of opportunities within the current technology market. TPG also believes it's well positioned with a bench of portfolio company CEOs, founders, and senior advisors that supplement their thematically integrated deal teams in sourcing investment opportunities and driving their historically strong returns across core sector themes in which they have demonstrated expertise. Now, the final 2 commitment recommendations are in the private real estate sector. The Carlyle Realty Partners Fund 9 will make opportunistic real estate investments in the United States. This fund is expected to provide investors attractive risk-adjusted returns from significant capital appreciation and current cash yields. The Carlyle Realty team focuses primarily on real estate demand drivers, which are segmented between 2 primary factors, those that are more correlated with and driven in part by the economic cycle, and those that are less correlated with the economic cycle and driven in part by shifts in demographic cohorts. Lastly, the Brookfield Strategic Real Estate Partners Fund 4 will continue the firm's historically successful strategy of making opportunistic real estate investments globally. Brookfield has a global footprint with local on-the-ground presence in key markets. They will seek to generate opportunistic risk-adjusted returns by acquiring real estate companies, portfolios, distressed loans and securities, and standalone assets. Post-investment, Brookfield employs an operations-oriented approach to create value through intensive asset management, proactive leasing, redevelopment, or repositioning. The fund is expected to be well diversified geographically with investments in the Americas, Europe, and the Middle East. Based on our review of the materials and our discussions with staff, the Council unanimously endorsed staff's recommendations for commitments to each of these 6 private market investment opportunities, as we believe each of these commitments would provide attractive risk-adjusted returns for the SBI investment portfolio. That concludes my prepared remarks, but I'd be happy to address any comments or questions that the members may have on any of these 6 private market commitment recommendations.
Thank you, Chair Martin. At this time, I would ask, is there any discussion or questions around the private market commitments? Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve the IAC's recommendations for private market commitments.
So moved.
At this time, I'd call roll call vote. Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Aye, Governor Walz vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The recommendations are approved. At this time, I would once again recognize Executive Director Perry to address the remaining items on the agenda before we hear from members of the public who have requested time to address the board. Director Perry, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Governor and members, the remaining items are the Public Markets Investment Program, to which we have already spoken about the performance. There are no specific items or recommendations that we have for the Public Markets Program. And same goes for TABI, the Participant Directed Investment Program and Non-Retirement Investment Programs. Believe that everything is sound and able. The next report is our the SBI Environmental, Social, and Governance report. And following that are reports from our consultants, both Aon and Makita, and also our comprehensive performance report, all of which I think are worthwhile reading for those, particularly if you don't have your Sominex. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Director. Is there any final discussion on the remaining items discussed by Director Perry? Hearing none, at this time, I would like to note the SBI received 2 requests from 2 individuals with the Minnesota Divestment Coalition who would like to speak at this meeting. I would ask each presenter to please limit your remarks to 5 minutes. I will call you by name and each of our presenters will be given 5 minutes. At this time, I would ask Ms. Gina Penn-Tracy, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Can we make sure we unmute our participants?
Ms. Gina, if you have called in, you will need to press *6.
At this time, we can come back to Ms. Penn-Tracy. I would ask, because I believe I saw her enter this, Ms. Christina Erickson, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Christina Erickson. I'm a current college student from Southeast Minnesota. I work with Minnesota Youth for Climate Justice, formerly Minnesota Youth Climate Strike. As Minnesotan youth fighting for a livable future, we have voiced our concern about SBI investments in fossil fuels many times. We're coming to you today with the specific lens of the fight against the Line 3 pipeline in northern Minnesota, which not only marks a serious violation of Indigenous sovereignty and disregard for the Mississippi River, but also a last-ditch effort to preserve the dying tar sands oil industry. While leaders and activists in other states have slowed and stopped the construction of other tar sands pipelines, such as the TMX pipeline, Keystone XL, and DAPL, protests here in Minnesota have already increased the costs of building Line 3 by millions and will continue until the pipeline is stopped. Not only is the pension fund invested in Enbridge, who is building the pipeline, but SBI also has $713 million invested in tar sands extraction companies. As outlined in Divest Invest Minnesota's briefing sent out earlier this month, there are 3 major reasons we see this as a problem. The first being tar sands have been a loss-making business, the second being the risk of stranded assets. Both the Walz and Biden administration have the goal of reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050. In order to do that, new fossil fuel infrastructure needs to stop by 2035, which means any infrastructure built now will be obsolete in just 14 years. Third, tar sands are the dirtiest form of crude oil, releasing 20% more carbon dioxide than other energy sources. Next to coal, which you have already pulled the fund out of, there's no worse investment than tar sands. Additionally, we have concerns about your investments in ExxonMobil, a company who also extracts Canadian tar sands. Last year, my friend and co-organizer Juweri Ajama was honored to speak at a press conference announcing attorney General Keith Ellison's lawsuit against ExxonMobil and other fossil fuel companies. We have every confidence in the Attorney General holding Exxon accountable for intentionally deceiving the public about the science of climate change. That's why we were surprised that the SBI has $295 million invested in ExxonMobil. We understand that the duties of the Attorney General's office do not necessarily overlap with those of the State Board of Investment, but it seems that remaining invested in ExxonMobil could inadvertently hurt the Minnesota pensions investments. We appreciate this board's consistent commitment to the prudent person rule, which governs your decision making, but it doesn't seem prudent to invest in unprofitable companies. It doesn't seem prudent to invest in the same companies that you're suing. It doesn't seem prudent to invest in the destruction of climate change. As we work towards divesting from all fossil fuels, consider evaluating the wisdom of investing in tar sands and in ExxonMobil. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. At this time, I would recognize Ms. Penn Tracy if she is available. Commissioner, do we see Ms. Penn Tracy anywhere on the line?
No, Governor, I do not see Ms. Penn Tracy on the line. If she is on the phone, she will need to press *6 to unmute.
Hearing none, we will move to any final discussions from the State Board of Investment. Hearing none, I would call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
And now call roll call vote. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Secretary of State Simon.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The State Board of Investment is now adjourned. We will say goodbye to Secretary of State and thank you for all your work. At this time, I would call the meeting of the Land Exchange Board to order. As chair of the Land Exchange Board, I've determined that an in-person meeting is impractical due to the current health pandemic and the peacetime emergency declared under Chapter 12 of Minnesota statutes. As is permitted in our open meeting laws, this meeting may be held virtually, and all votes will be counted with a roll call vote. Our first order of business, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the minutes of the February 24th, 2021 meeting.
So moved.
I'd now call roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The minutes are approved. I'd now like to call for a motion to approve the Land Exchange Board speaker policy, public speaker policy. This is identical to the ones just approved for the Executive Council and the State Board of Investments. Is there any discussion regarding the policy?
We know that
I would now ask for a motion to approve the speaker policy.
So moved.
I would now ask each member to state their vote. Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison.
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The Land Exchange speaker policy is approved. Before I recognize DNR Lands and Minerals Division Joe Henderson, I would ask everyone to please check their microphones to be on mute if you are not speaking. At this time, I want to recognize Land and Minerals Director Joe Henderson, present a request for approval of 2 proposed internal exchanges. Director Henderson, you are recognized for as much time as you may consume.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor, members of the Land Exchange Board. As stated, my name is Joe Henderson. I'm the Director of the Division of Lands and Minerals at the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. As stated also, I'm here to propose 2 land exchange projects today. So starting on tab 3 in your materials, I'd like to talk about land exchange B10015. So this exchange involves a 0.43 acre tax forfeit lot in a platted subdivision on Vladimirov Lake for 80 acres of private land with a tributary of the Swan River going through the property. The tax forfeit land is valued at $78,600 and the private land is valued at $40,400. The Monsees have agreed to pay the $38,200 difference in value. If completed, the land exchange would consolidate tax forfeit land holdings and increase efficiencies in land management. This property has management and access appeal to Aiken County. The tax forfeit land acquired by the Monsees will allow them to acquire property on a rural development lake. You'll find Exhibit EXB0010015 in your materials. This exhibit shows a map of where these parcels are in Aiken County, and also there are maps showing how this land exchange would fit with existing tax forfeit lands, state lands, and other private lands. The Aiken County Board has approved this exchange. Resolutions are on file as evidence that all steps have been taken to comply with the law prior to submission to the Land Exchange Board for approval. A public hearing was held on September 22nd, 2020, with no objections received. The county attorney's title opinion has been reviewed by the Department of Natural Resources legal staff and has been forwarded to the Attorney General's office for approval. It's requested that the Land Exchange Board approve this exchange subject to the approval of the title opinion by the Attorney General's office. Final approval is recommended by the DNR for land exchange B10015 between Aiken County and William and Cynthia Monsey. I will now address comments and questions prior to moving on to the second land exchange proposal.
Thank you, Director Henderson. Is there any discussion on B10015? Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve the exchange on Bravo 10015. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
At this time, I would call a roll call vote to approve the land exchange. Attorney General Ellison, how do you vote?
Yes.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Aye. Governor Walz vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. Exchange Bravo 10015 is now approved. Director Henderson, you may now present your second item.
Thank you, Governor. Continuing on tab 4 of your materials, you'll find land exchange B10018. This exchange project is under the authority of Minnesota Statute section 94.3495, a copy of which is included in your materials. The purpose of this law is to expedite exchanges of land between state government subdivisions in the state. This project involves the exchange of 1,400 acres of county tax forfeit land valued at $905,255 and 1,362 acres of county fee-owned land valued at $976,011. County assessed values were utilized for determination of the land value and approved by the county board. Expedited exchanges over 100 acres may have values within 10%. This exchange does fall within the acceptable statutory parameters for valuation. If completed, this land exchange would allow the county to acquire rural forest lands to consolidate current tax forfeited land holdings. The state tax forfeited lands to become fee-owned are suited for wetland mitigation project being pursued by the county, aggregate resources, and land for future maintenance facilities for the Public Works Department. You will find Exhibit EXB0010018 in your materials. This shows a map of where these parcels are in St. Louis County, and the key indicates that the red parcels will transfer from the county to the state, and the blue parcels will then transfer from the state to the county. The St. Louis County Board has approved this expedited exchange project and land values on January 26, 2021. Under Minnesota Statute Section 94.3495, title insurance was utilized to meet the examination of title requirement. Title commitments have been approved by St. Louis County. Resolutions are on file as evidence that all steps have been taken to comply with the law prior to submission to the Land Exchange Board for approval. Attorney General's Office review is not required under this statute. Final approval is recommended by the DNR for land exchange B10018 between St. Louis County, county fee-owned land, and St. Louis County tax forfeit land. I will now stand for comments and questions.
Thank you again, Director Henderson. At this time, I would ask, is there any discussion on the exchange relating to Bravo 10018? Auditor Blaha, you are recognized.
Thank you, Governor, and Thank you, Commissioner. And I know that we have a representative from St. Louis County here on the call too. So it's just a good time to thank everybody whose names show up in these reports for us on Land Exchange. We know that every one of them, you know, whether you're trying to do well while you do good or do good while you do well, you know what the saying is, but supporting us in trying to manage our resources well. And I know that every dot on these things are more than just a easy little thing, that all of these dots took a lot of work and a lot of effort, and really appreciate everybody's foresight and cooperation on these. Thank you.
Thank you, Auditor. Well stated. A lot of work goes into this, and it is about management. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve exchange Bravo 10018.
So moved.
And I'll call roll call vote. Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Aye. Governor Walz vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries and exchange Bravo 10018 is approved. Thank you, Director Henderson. At this time, I'd like to recognize U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Area Supervisor Tom Kerr, Deputy Realty Officer Daniel Kepford, and Morris Wetland Management Division Manager Bruce Fresky to present 3 requests for approval. The 3 of you are recognized to present your requests.
Thank you, Governor Walz and members. For the record, I'm Danielle Kepford, the Realty Officer for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Great Lakes region, and am located in Bloomington, Minnesota. As mentioned, also representing the Fish and Wildlife Service are Tom Kerr, Area Supervisor, and Bruce Fresky, District Manager. We have 3 items on the agenda today. Please refer first to the tab 5. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is seeking your approval for these proposed acquisitions using the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund. For the record, I will read the first paragraph. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requests authorization to purchase fee title for 189.9 acres of private land in the counties listed below under the authority of Section 4C of the Migratory Bird Hunting and Conservation Stamp Act of March 16, 1934, as amended, and in compliance with the provisions of the Wetland Loan Act of 1961, as amended. The Wetlands Loan Act of 1961 requires that no land shall be acquired with monies from the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund unless the acquisition has been approved by the governor of the state or the appropriate state agency. In Minnesota, approval is provided by the Land Exchange Board. Again, for the record and in summary, there are 2 fee title tracts proposed for acquisition in 2 counties. All the proposed acquisitions have been certified by the county boards. We request that you approve these acquisitions, and we stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Kepford. At this time, I would open for discussions from the board, but I would always note this is one of the most successful acts that Congress has ever done and been a part of. And it also should be noted that the Mickelson and Thompson families being a part of this, that there's always the private land involved that's good for all of us. So I'm excited about these, and obviously I support this acquisition. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve the request for certified fee acquisition.
So moved.
Right. With that, I would call roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Auditor Blaha?
Aye.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. This request is approved. Ms. Kepford, you are recognized to present your next request.
Thank you, Governor and members. Now we do request that you refer to tab 6. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is again seeking your approval for these proposed acquisitions using the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund. And this first paragraph reads, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requests authorization to purchase 37.6 acres of wetland easements and 262.72 acres of habitat easements on private property in the counties listed below, under the authority of Section 4C of the Migratory Bird Hunting and Conservation Stamp Act of March 16, 1934, as amended, and in compliance with the provisions of the Wetland Loan Act of 1961, as amended. Again, the Wetlands Loan Act of 1961 requires that no land shall be acquired with monies from the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund unless the acquisition has been approved by the governor of the state or the appropriate state agency, in which case approval in Minnesota is provided by the Land Exchange Board. For the record and in summary, there are 6 easements proposed for acquisition in 4 counties. These proposed acquisitions have been certified by the respective county boards, and we request that you approve these acquisitions and stand for any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Gephardt. Once again, I am in support of these and would open it up for any questions from the Land Exchange Board. Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve the certified fee acquisitions.
So moved.
Roll call vote of all members. Auditor Blaha, how do you vote on the motion?
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison?
Aye.
Aye. Governor Walz vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The request is approved. At this time, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is recognized to approve easement of other acquisition.
Thank you again, Governor and members. Now, please refer to tab 7, as Governor Walz stated, certified easement other acquisition. We are seeking approval for the proposed acquisition using the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requests approval to purchase 132-acre habitat easement in Big Stone County in compliance with the provisions of Section 4C of the Act of March 16, 1934, as amended and as implemented by the Procedural Agreement of May 23, 1962, as amended. One of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's goals is to be transparent with the Land Exchange Board. We want to highlight this proposed easement acquisition and offer some background on our process with the counties. This tract has been certified for acquisition by the county board with a contingency. The location and legal description of this acquisition is depicted graphically on the county map in your packets. The Big Stone County Board certified the easement acquisition on March 2nd of 2021, only if the following language was included in the easement document. And I'll read that for you. It's also subject to the right-of-way of any ditches under the Drainage Authority and associated rights of entry and occupation for inspection and maintenance purposes pursuant to Minnesota Statutes, Chapter 103E. The services easements, including this proposed easement, are standard template contracts used throughout the United States prairie pothole region in multiple states. The purpose of the easements are to work with landowners to provide protection for important prairie wetland habitats across the prairie pothole region of North America, which is an important breeding area for 1/3 of the continent's waterfowl breeding population. Although migratory bird habitat is an important goal of the easement program, the grassland and wetlands protected in the easement program also provide benefits for pollinator habitat, carbon sequestration, and important habitat areas for species adaptation to climate change. Easement contracts do not acquire current or previous rights. Easements are subservient to existing rights already. County Ditch 2 crosses the northeast corner of the property. The county has a pre-existing right on the property for maintenance of the county ditch. Acquisition of the services easement is subject to those rights, and we recognize that as a basic tenet of the law. Although the counties keep their interests, and although we are acquiring the easement subject to current rights, Big Stone County still required additional language be added to the easement contract in order to certify the easement. The Fish and Wildlife Service and the landowners had multiple meetings and conversations with the county. We did agree to add the county's proposed language to the easement contract. The contract language has already been updated, and the landowners have agreed to this minor change. We have agreed to this one-time change since it will allow the landowners to achieve their conservation goals. Service staff are now available for your questions and request approval for acquisition of this tract.
Thank you, Ms. Gephardt. At this time, is there any discussion from the Land Exchange Board on the proposed easement acquisition? Hearing none, I would call for a motion to approve the requested certified easement other acquisition.
So moved.
I now call roll call vote. Attorney General Ellison,
Aye.
Auditor Blaha.
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. The motion carries. The request is approved. Thank you to our guests from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. At this time, is there any final thoughts from the Land Exchange Board? Hearing none, I'd call for a motion to adjourn the meeting
So moved.
and a roll call vote. Auditor Blaha,
Aye.
Attorney General Ellison,
Aye.
I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of the motion. This meeting of the Land Exchange Board is adjourned. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor and
Thank you to
members.
the staff for the hard work. We appreciate it.